Thank you, everybody, and welcome. My name is Andrew Berman. I'm the Executive Director of the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, and welcome to the unveiling of our historic plaque honoring the writer James Baldwin, who lived right here in this residence, 81 Horatio Street. Thank you very much. Our historic plaque program is done in partnership with Two Boots, and you're going to be hearing from Phil Hartman from Two Boots Pizza shortly. There's a lot of people here to thank and acknowledge, and I just want to say a few words, actually, as a way of introduction as to why we're here today. Of course, we're here to honor James Baldwin, a great American writer who had fame and impact in his lifetime, but is just as present today in our literature, in our civil rights discourse, and in the citywide celebration of the Year of James Baldwin, which recently concluded. I want to extend special thanks to the owner of this house, Austin and Gabriella Hurst, who took an interest in this project and graciously allowed us to install this plaque today. We also extend our gratitude to two people who are very knowledgeable about James Baldwin, both the man and his work, who helped us in many ways to put this event together. Dr. Rich Blint, a Baldwin Scholar at Columbia University. Rich, where are you? And Eileen Ahern of Simon & Schuster. Is that Eileen? I also want to thank and acknowledge Karen Lowe from the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, who did so much work to put today's event together today, and all of the GVSHP staff that's here today. We're also delighted to have a very special group of people with us to mark this occasion. After me, you'll hear from our plaque program partner, Two Boots Pizza owner, Phil Hartman. Following that, we'll hear from Trevor Baldwin, a nephew of James Baldwin. From Max Rudin, publisher of the Library of America, which has published 3 authoritative anthologies of Baldwin's work. From poet Gregory Pardlo, who won this year's Pulitzer Prize for his book, Digest. And of course, writer and villager Fran Lebowitz. I also just want to acknowledge that in addition to this incredible roster of speakers, there are many, many friends and family of James Baldwin who are here today, all of whom I know have a lot to contribute in terms of his memory and his impact, and we're really honored to have you here with us today. And I want to say that after we're done with all of the speeches and the comments, we'll be able to enjoy some Two Boots Pizza, courtesy of Phil and Two Boots. Just a brief word about the Greenwich Village Society, if you're not familiar with us. In addition to doing this plaque program with Two Boots, we are a community-based nonprofit organization that works to document and celebrate the special history of Greenwich Village, the East Village, NoHo, and the Meatpacking District. A lot of what we do is advocacy work to help protect the neighborhood, to make sure that beautiful historic buildings like this are not demolished, and that inappropriate, out-of-scale new development doesn't take place in our neighborhood. And I know many of you have received some handouts today about just around the corner, some work that we're doing, some threats we're facing, so please feel free to ask questions or get more involved.
Save Gansevoort Street!
Save Gansevoort Street, indeed. So, James Arthur Baldwin was born on August 2nd, 1924 in New York's Harlem Hospital. He died on December 1st, 1987 at his home in the south of France, and in his 63 years produced a body of fiction, nonfiction, and drama that quickly became an essential part of the American canon. One of 8 siblings, Baldwin always loved to read and write. He said he, quote, read every single book in the Harlem Library on 138th Street. His father was a preacher, and Baldwin was a teenage preacher for several years, then left the church, later graduating from DeWitt High School in the Bronx. Right next door to my high school in the Bronx. As a teenager and young man, he confronted the considerable stigmas and challenges faced by African Americans and gay people at the time. He met painter Beaufort Delaney, who was also black and gay, right here in Greenwich Village, who he considered his spiritual father. He escaped depression in America by moving to Paris in 1948, later calling it the best thing I ever did. Between stints in France and Turkey, Baldwin lived right here in Chelsea and in Harlem, all the while producing a steady stream of writing. Baldwin was known for iconic and culture-shifting works, such as Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, Another Country, The Fire Next Time, Blues for Mr. Charlie, and A Beale Street for Talk, among many others. Baldwin played an incredibly important role in the struggle for Black civil rights. He aligned himself with the ideals of the Congress for Racial Equality and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC. By the spring of 1963, Baldwin had become so much of a spokesperson for the civil rights movement that for its May 17th issue on the turmoil in Birmingham, Alabama, Time magazine put James Baldwin on its cover. "There is not another writer," said Time, "who expresses with such poignancy and abrasiveness the dark realities of the racial ferment in North and South." Poet Amiri Baraka called Baldwin God's revolutionary mouth. But Baldwin's potent critiques went hand in hand with his abiding love of humankind. "It is the inalterable truth that all men are brothers," he said. His motto was, "Say yes to life." And his life and work intersected and collaborated with many of the major figures of his time, including Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, Nina Simone, Langston Hughes, Miles Davis, his old friend Marlon Brando, and many more major figures in art and politics. Among many other awards, Baldwin was made a Commander of the Legion of Honor by the French government in 1986. Sadly, at just 63 years, he died of stomach cancer in 1987 in France. His passing was celebrated by thousands at a funeral service in New York's Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Baldwin was a visionary, a revolutionary, and a revolutionary on matters of race and sexuality, and so much more, whose art, work, and life touched millions, and whose impact and message seems as relevant today as it did more than half a century ago. He drew inspiration from and had an enormous impact upon the village, which he called his home, not just on Horatio Street, but in the many clubs and cafes throughout the neighborhood in which he was a regular fixture, one of which, of course, was the San Remo Cafe on McDougal Street, home of another plaque that GVSHP and Two Boots placed 2 years ago. For this and so many other reasons, I am proud to, on behalf of the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation, in a few minutes, unveil this plaque today to in one small but tangible way, leave another mark of James Baldwin's presence and impact. So thank you very much, and I'm going to invite Phil Hartman from Two Boots to come up and say a few words.
A short person set this up, so.
Hello. Hey, thank you for coming. I'm going to keep this really short given the incredible roster of speakers we have. I just want to say this though, that we love making pizza at Two Boots and love sharing it. We're going to have some pizza a little later on. But we love just as much working with the arts community. We feel like we get so much from the New York arts community every day, and we just can't give back enough. So we love working with GVSHP, one of our favorite organizations. Thank you for coming here and supporting them. And we do stuff all year long with artists, writers, dancers, poets. But as I say, no matter how much pizza we sell, we can't say thank you enough times because we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't exist without the downtown arts community. So thank you so much.
And thank you, Phil, for all the incredible support you give, not just to us, but to so many great community groups out there. Next up, we're going to hear from Trevor Baldwin, a nephew of James Baldwin.
I feel like I need a DJ for this.
Something just happened.
First of all, this shirt is actually compliments of the James Baldwin School. I wish I had some for sale because everybody is asking me about it. But there's a school, James Baldwin, you should send your kids to. The other disclaimer is that I am not the nephew from his essay masterpiece, Letter to My Nephew, in the Fire Next Time. I always have to preface it with that. I wasn't even born yet, that's first of all. I've been saying that to teachers since kindergarten. For the context of the timeline, I was 13 when he passed. I was attending the cathedral school at the time, and that's ironically where the funeral took place. That nephew from the Fire Next Time quickly became Black America's nephew, and is my father's firstborn. My dad was the fourth born out of the 9 Baldwin siblings. It's a little math. He and Uncle Jimmy were separated by 6 years, so it gives you context of the stepladder children. On this past October 1st, actually, my father would have been 85. Happy birthday, Dad. There were 4 brothers. All are no longer with us, but the sisters are standing strong. My mother, the sister-in-law, is here in attendance. My mom. I start with family because, as many of you know, Uncle Jimmy is all about family in life and in literature. I love when people share stories of their encounters with Uncle Jimmy, but I really listen when they tell me about them meeting my grandmother, Bertus, because then I know he really liked you if he introduced you to his mother. So on behalf of the family, I want to thank the Village Society and the sponsors for preserving this and other cultural vestiges throughout the city. Last year, we celebrated his 90th birthday. It was a year of Baldwin in association with Harlem Stage, New York Live Arts, Columbia University, National Black Theaters, other organizations. And on his actual birthday on August 2nd, we had a ceremony uptown, a co-naming on 128th between 5th and Madison, James Baldwin Place. I'd like to acknowledge also the biographer Herb Boyd, who planted the seed for that street name. The following year, here we are at a ceremony where people used to say we're going to Jimmy's Place in the Village. Maybe next year we'll keep the party going and go to the south of France at Jimmy's Place in St. Paul de Bronx. Does Two Boots have a story? Well, you guys gotta get one in the south of France next year. One of my favorite fun facts is that Uncle Jimmy and Marlon Brando were friends before either of them were famous. So that's a testament to their character. They met in the Village. Given the times, I think that speaks volumes of their character. Grandma would tell stories without fanfare and say, oh yeah, that's Jimmy's friend. I cook breakfast for them after they hang out partying all night. Oh, Marlon Brando? Yeah, that guy. I'd be remiss not to mention Uncle Jimmy's big brother, father figure, and mentor, Buford Delaney, the artist who ushered him into the world away from the world Uncle Jimmy knew. The Village was now a respite, a haven, a university, a gateway to Gertrude Stein's Paris, a destiny of hope and promise that he has arrived at Horatio. In Maya Angelou's biography collection, she writes, Jimmy Baldwin was a whirlwind who stirred everything and everybody. He lived in a dizzying pace, and I loved spinning with him. Once, after we spent an afternoon talking and drinking with a group of white writers in downtown bar, he said he liked that I could hold my liquor and my position. That's the texture that helped weave into the fabric of this cultural exchange that we are all benefiting from today. The wealth of Uncle Jimmy's jackpot, being born Black, poor, and gay, was spread throughout, setting a meter and a tempo that spawned a beat generation. If he was here today, I imagine he would tell us with a devilish grin, the irony of Kerouac and Ginsberg having no rhythm, Norman Mailer owing him money for a column he wrote for this starred newspaper called Voice, Capote being a terrible lover. No, that's not actual fact. No, that was for the sake of the speech. Off the record. The point is, Uncle Jimmy was among tenured elite in this highly concentrated campus of village visionaries who helped shape the counterculture for many years to come. The Fire Next Time came out in 1963. The earlier version was published in the New Yorker in '62, based on the climate in America at the time. As the country approached the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, it's safe to say that during his time here at 81 Horatio, in between staying in this country and writing another country, in between the pan and the Smith Corona, between the wines and the whiskey, the calls from Kazan and Belafonte, while Hoover eavesdrops, a literary award and a lynching, sharing scars and house keys with Sam Floyd, his brothers, his sisters, and many others from Harlem and Horatio. He left his writing on these walls, and this plaque is a testament that Jimmy was here. Thank you.
Really beautiful. Thank you so much. Next up, Max Rudin, the publisher of the Library of America, which has published 3 authoritative anthologies of Baldwin's work.
Thanks very much, and good evening. For those who may not know, Library of America is a nonprofit publisher and cultural institution dedicated to publishing authoritative new editions of great American writing. We have Baldwin's complete novels, stories, and essays in 3 volumes. The first 2 edited by Toni Morrison, published several years ago, and the most recent, out just this month, the later novels from the late 60s and early 70s, edited by Darryl Pinckney. It's hard to address in 5 minutes the importance and greatness of Baldwin, the power and challenge of the uncommonly brilliant, instructive, bitter, fiery, mournful, graceful, irritating, amusing, and inspiring legacy that he left us. I'll just make 2 observations about it. One is that, and it's appropriate to tonight's event, Baldwin added a mythic place to American literature. It's often not thought of that way. But Baldwin's New York is a place that's more than a place, like Twain's Mississippi or Faulkner's Cheever's Westchester or Chandler's LA. Baldwin, as we've heard, was an expatriate and transatlantic commuter, but as a writer, he never left New York. In book after book, he returned to Harlem, where he was born, and to the Village, where he found his sexual identity and his vocation as a writer. In Baldwin's essays and stories, the streets of New York, an imagined landscape that are born of memory, bitter clarity, and common generosity and love, are a kind of map of the potential liberation for the writer and for America. Harlem means the struggle through rage, hatred, and despair to win a fragile vision of the humanity of both oppressors and oppressed. The Village means the exploration of sexuality to learn how to accept and love both oneself and others, without which the other part can't come true. Even the public library, where, as Baldwin says, I read books like they were some kind of weird food, is significant. It's the place where the accumulated weight of Western culture, of Shakespeare and Dickens and Baldwin's beloved Henry James, is mastered and made one's own. The other thing I would want to talk about is place in a different sense, the place where Baldwin's voice comes from, and where the authority of that voice comes from. In this passage from The Fire Next Time, listen to what happens to the personal pronouns I and we. The price of the liberation of the white people is the liberation of the blacks, the total liberation in the cities, in the towns, before the law, and in the mind. Why, for example, especially knowing the family as I do, I should want to marry your sister is a great mystery to me. But your sister and I have every right to marry if we wish to, and no one has the right to stop us. If she cannot raise me to her level, perhaps I can raise her to mine. In short, we, the black and the white, deeply need each other here if we are really to become a nation, if we are really, that is, to achieve our identity, our maturity as men and women. I'm always blown away by that we. And I try to imagine the agony and the achieved vision behind being able to go from that I to that we. It's connected in Baldwin with what he said when he wrote, "It's a terrible and inexorable law that one cannot deny the humanity of another without diminishing one's own." So the we in Baldwin has the power of prophecy. It taps very deep roots in American writing. It resonates with John Winthrop's "We shall be as a city on a hill." It resonates with the founders, "We the people." It resonates with a lot of things. And also behind the I is also most of American literature. That challenging, skeptical, humorous, bold I has behind it Frederick Douglass, Whitman, and Melville. As I say, most of American writing, which has always been about the collision between American ideals and American history, especially racial history. So anyway, just to close, I just want to say about that the forces arrayed against a writer prophet of Baldwin's power are always tremendous. They are social, cultural, psychological, and political. And in his own day, as I'm sure you all know, as Vietnam began to eclipse civil rights as the big issue for everybody, for many people, I should say, and ideological fault lines began to fracture the movement, Baldwin was attacked from all sides. For some, he was betraying his art for politics. For others, he was too much the artist, too concerned with personal issues to help the political struggle. And it's one reason, actually, his later novels haven't gotten their due. He was caught in the middle of a shitstorm in the late 60s, and we hope that this latest volume will help to correct that. And it was a tragedy for him personally. It was, he felt he went away a broken man, and Chinua Achebe said of him at that period, "What was his crime that we should turn him into a man of sadness, this man inhabited by a soul so eager to be loved and to smile." And I want to give the last word to Baldwin here. Despite all that, Baldwin was always very clear-eyed about the writer's calling. He put it this way in a piece about Shakespeare, which is in the Library of America collected essays volume. He wrote, "Though I and many of us have bitterly bewailed the lot of an American writer, to be part of a people who have ears to hear and hear not, who have eyes to see and see not, I am sure that Shakespeare did the same. Only he saw, as I think we must, that the people who produce the poet are not responsible to him. He is responsible to them. That is why he is called a poet. And his responsibility, which is also his joy and his strength and his life, is to defeat all labors and complicate all battles by insisting on the human riddle, to bear witness as long as breath is in him to that mighty, unnameable, transfiguring force which lives in the soul of man, and to aspire to do his work so well that when the breath has left him, the people, all people, italic exclamation point, all people who search in the rubble for a sign or a witness will be able to find him there."
Next up, we're going to hear from poet Gregory Pardlo, who won this year's Pulitzer Prize for his book, Digest.
Hello. It is an incredible honor to be here. Can't really hear me. Okay. Well, I just how's that? No, I think we got it. Thanks. Okay, so I am absolutely thrilled to be here. So I was asked when to talk about my meeting, my encounter, my first or early encounters with Baldwin's work, and I had to keep going back because I had so many memories that seemed sort of the initial encounter, but they all sort of led back to something previous. And I grew up in South Jersey outside of Philadelphia. My family's all from Philadelphia. And and there's a bookstore, at least there was at the time, called Giovanni's Room. And I remember, so I come from a literate family, but certainly by no means a literary family. And someone mentioned to me that Giovanni's Room was a title of a book by a Black author. And so it always stuck in my head. And one day I was in the bookstore and I came across this book, Giovanni's Room. And I thought, if it's important enough to name a bookstore after it, I should take a look at it. So I started to read it. And there were no Black people in the book. I thought, how is it? There are no Black people in this book by a Black author. And it just absolutely, okay, yeah, all right, so I get, there's a queer thing going on, I get it, I understand that, and I understand how that's transgressive, but there are no Black people. So it really had me rethinking all of my assumptions about what constitutes Black literature, right? Here was this guy who did not answer the call, the imperative, the racial imperative to, write in the mission of some kind of racial logic. So that was the first thing that kind of put Baldwin deep in my psyche. The second thing was after I got familiar with his work, there's a passage where he's talking about Black authors. I'm often in environments where I am one of, if not the only, African American in the room. And when we meet another African American, there is this interesting kind of, dance, I suppose, that goes on. Where are you in relation to this institution, this larger community that we find ourselves in, when we find ourselves kind of sussing each other around? Baldwin gave me a language for understanding that relationship away, apart from white America, right? That I can think about my interior, my emotional connection to all of the neuroses, let's say, that go along with feeling oneself out of place. And the third thing that I wanted to talk about was he figures America as a kind of dysfunctional family, and that was a figure that I could very much identify with. That made an awful lot of sense to me, so that not one that, America isn't, yes, it's flawed, but it's not, we are flawed together, right? So there isn't one critical party that is at fault. We are all participating in the project of America, and we're all responsible, mutually responsible for this project. And that seemed to be a really liberating thing too, like not thinking of myself as speaking out of any sense of victimhood, and that my anger could be justified without turning into any kind of hatred. Okay, so I wanted to think about, I wanted to share with you this introduction to Nobody Knows My Name. And here he's reflecting on, this comes out in '61, and he's reflecting on a 6-year period prior, during which he lived here for some time, and the essays in Nobody Knows My Name were written. These essays were written over the last 6 years, in various places and in many states of mind. These years seemed, on the whole, rather sad and aimless to me. My life in Europe was ending, not because I had decided that it should, but because it became clearer and clearer as I dealt with the streets, the climate, and the temperament of Paris, fled Spain and Corsica and Scandinavia, that something had ended for me. I'd rather think now, to tell the sober truth, that it was merely my youth, first youth anyway, that was ending, and I hated to see it go. In the context of my life, the end of my youth was signaled by the reluctant realization that I had indeed become a writer. So far, so good. Now, I would have to go the distance. In America, the color of my skin had stood between myself and me. In Europe, that barrier was down. Nothing is more desirable than to be released from an affliction, but nothing is more frightening than to be divested of a crutch. It turned out that the question of who I was not solved because I had removed myself from the social forces which menace me. Anyway, these forces had become interior, and I had dragged them across the ocean with me. The question of who I was had at last become a personal question, and the answer was to be found in me. This is another big gift that Baldwin gave me. I think that there's always something frightening about this realization. I know it frightened me. That was one of the reasons that I dawdled in the European haven for so long. And yet, I could not escape the knowledge, though God knows I tried, that if I was still in need of havens, my journey had been for nothing. Havens are high-priced. The price exacted of the haven dweller is that he contrived to delude himself into believing that he has found a haven. It would seem, unless one looks more deeply at the phenomenon, that most people are able to delude themselves and get through their lives quite happily. But I still believe that the unexamined life is not worth living. And I know that self-delusion, in the service of no matter what small or lofty cause, is a price no writer can afford. His subject is himself and the world, and it requires every ounce of stamina he can summon to attempt to look on himself and the world as they are. What it came to for me was that I no longer needed to fear leaving Europe, no longer needed to hide myself from the high and dangerous rooms of the world. The world was enormous, and I could go anywhere in it I chose, including America. And I decided to return here because I was afraid to. But the question which confronted me, nibbled at me in my stony course in exile was, am I afraid of returning to America? Or am I afraid of journeying any further with myself? Once this question had presented itself, it would not be appeased. It had to be answered. Be careful what you set your heart upon, someone once said to me, for it will surely be yours. Well, I had said that I was going to be a writer, God, Satan, and Mississippi notwithstanding, and that color did not matter, and that I was going to be free. And here I was, left with only myself to deal with. It was entirely up to me. These essays are a very small part of a private law book. The question of color takes up much space in these pages, but the question of color, especially in this country, operates to hide the graver questions of the self. That is precisely why what we like to call the Negro problem is so tenacious in American life and so dangerous. And my own experience proves to me that the connection between American whites and blacks is far deeper and more passionate than any of us like to think. And even in icy Sweden, I found myself talking with a man whose endless questioning has given him himself, and who reminded me of Black Baptist preachers. The questions which one asks oneself begin at last to illuminate the world and become one's key to the experience of others. One can only face in others what one can face in oneself. On this confrontation depends the measure of our wisdom and compassion. This energy is all that one finds in the rubble of vanished civilizations, and the only hope for ours. Thank you.
Fran Lebowitz.
I've never spent so much time looking up in my life. I'm not the looking up type. What they asked me to talk about is what James Baldwin means to me. And they also asked me to speak for 2 or 3 minutes. So I'm going to only tell you 2 or 3 minutes what James Baldwin means to me. And I will tell you the first time I ever encountered James Baldwin, not only in person, which I never did. When I was young, when I was a kid, there was a television show called the GVSHP Show. It was on, I think, Sunday afternoons. And one Sunday afternoon, my mother was watching this show. I came into the room, And she was watching the show, and I sat down and started watching the show, and James Baldwin was on the This Escort show. And I had no idea who he was, and I was so struck and moved by him. It was 100% like lightning bolt. And it wasn't because I knew that James Baldwin was a writer. I didn't know he was a writer. I just had never heard anyone that smart talk. It was a revelation to me and an incredible liberation to me because I thought, yes, I can get out of here and I'm going to go wherever he is, and there's going to be lots of people who talk like that. So there were lots more than where I was, which was a little town in New Jersey. There were never lots of people who talked like James Baldwin. I asked my mother who he was. She told me. I got his books. I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I have read every one of his books 100 million times. And the very first time I saw him, it's his face. I remember so much his face on the television screen. You know, I felt like I was related to him. You know, and I was so moved by him. I did not know he was gay. Maybe I was 12 or 13. I was just starting to like think, probably I'm gay, but that's not the word that was used then. Don't kid yourself. And so you don't have to be poor and black and gay. You can be white and middle class and gay. You can be not gay. You can be not black. You can simply be someone who fell in love with his mind. I mean, you know, I know James Baldwin was basically a novelist. He wrote a lot of essays. This is probably bad news or new news to people. You don't have to be really smart to write novels. You don't. I mean, you can be a really wonderful novelist, and it doesn't mean you're smart, you're an idiot. But you do not have to be smart as James Baldwin was. You just don't. He had like excess intelligence. Intelligence unnecessary. And he had intelligence that probably, even though I didn't know him, if he came back to life, I would tell him, believe me, this was one of your problems. Okay, so I came to New York because I always wanted to come to New York. Because I always knew that New York was going to be better than where I was. But I came to the Village, and as I recently, when I say recently, not my age, could be last year, I was doing an interview with a gay Swedish magazine, of which there are hundreds. Hundreds! Sweden is like this house. Hundreds. And the kid interviewing me said to me, when you first came here, you lived in the Village, right? I said, yes. He said, you lived there because it was Bohemian, right? I said, no. We lived there because it was cheap. It was Bohemian because we lived there. James Baldwin has been dead for many years. He's always home. He is home to many people. In a way, he's home to me. When I sat in that room with my mother, who really wasn't crazy about me at the time, I kind of brought her, not really, he felt more home to me. If James Baldwin came back to life, there's many things that he, you know, people say even to me, who I am, James Baldwin is exactly the age of my father. So, at least there's a person I am younger than still. James Baldwin came back to life. You know, I'm sure he'd be shocked to hear there was such a thing as gay marriage. He might like it. He might be like me, like, who cares? Let's get married. He would probably be very surprised he was a black president. These are things to the good in the sense that people want them. They are liberating. I think that what James Baldwin might be the most shocked by is that, yes, you can be the president, you can get married, but you can't smoke inside. Mr. Baldwin, smoking cigarettes, the contempt in which people are able to respond to smoking cigarettes has completely replaced the contempt people have for homosexuals. Completely replaced it. So yes, in LA, I was someone took me to a gay bar. It's huge. It has a plate glass window. There's valet parking. Gay bars, when I was young, were in basements and back rooms. They had red lights to warn you the cops were coming. And one of these young girls said to me, "Was this like it was when you were young?" I said, "Yeah, exactly." Valet parking. I said, "No." On the other hand, we could smoke inside. I think that he would be very surprised by that. I think he would be, I don't know him. I don't know him at all. You know, there are not enough people who wear James Baldwin. Every single kid I give Baldwin's books to, 100% respond to them. 100%. You know, some of these are people who are like not the world's biggest readers. You know, like someone just said, I can't remember the poet who preceded me, who I'm very sorry, I did tell you that we met, and I realized when you got up here that I saw your picture. So we didn't meet, you're right. Now we have. The people that you give Baldwin to, they respond in so many different ways. The first time I met James Purdy, a writer who really no one knows who he is, and who he was, and a really important writer, and it must have been in the late 70s. We walked around the village, and we stopped in front of the building. He said, "Fran, do you know who lived here?" I said, "I don't. No, I don't." He said, "Fran, a very famous lesbian lived here." I said, "I don't know who it was." "Fran, Willa Cather lived here." "How could you not know that?" And I said, "Because that's not the first thing I would think about. That's not the first thing I would think about Willa Cather. You know, James Baldwin being black is not the first thing I would think about James Baldwin. James Baldwin being gay is not the first thing I would think about James Baldwin. James Baldwin being a unique, central, artistic presence in the history of the country is the first thing I would think about. And it is the first thing you should think about, especially when you see poor Fran outside in the cold weather swimming. Thank you."
Thank you very much. So now we're going to move to the moment that everybody's been waiting for, and I'm going to ask Phil and all the other speakers to join me over here for the unveiling of the plaque.
Sexuality and morality, and played an important role in the civil rights movement. The Village is reflected in the best-selling novel, Another Country, which he worked on. It's very exciting. Thank you very much, everybody, for turning out tonight. All of the people for whom James Baldwin has a special connection, a special meaning, personal or otherwise. We're thrilled that this will be here, hopefully in perpetuity, to memorialize his great contribution.
I wish the pizza was going to be hotter, but
Everybody always is.
Yeah. Well, let's dig in and celebrate, and thank you very much, everybody, for being here.